Chiefs Kingdom. Welcome into the latest edition, the newest episode of the AP Out of Structure podcast on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. I am Ron Kopp Jr., the lead analyst at the site. I'm usually joined by my guy, Matt Stagner. He had some important things to do this week, so I'm bringing in, the best backup podcast host there is in the game right now, I got to say. Caleb's filled in before the season already. Caleb James at CJ Scoobs on Twitter. He is joining me today. We're going to talk about Chiefs Vikings, the big win on Sunday. Chiefs win 27-20. But Caleb, I'll just bring you in on this, man. How you feeling? How you feeling about the win before we get into anything else?
That game was about what I expected it to be. I kind of had a feeling it was going to be, high scoring, close game, because even though, headed in Minnesota is only 1-3, they've still got that offensive threat. But, that they're a real good example of just how tough it is to win in the NFL, because you do have a pretty good football team that's probably not going to make the playoffs up there now just because they've lost so many close games. But, the Chiefs found a way to win another one, even if they weren't really playing their best football all the way through.
Yeah, Minnesota is a very crazy team to root for, because last year you had them going 11-0 in one-score games up until the postseason. They had that great record. This year, you mentioned how hard it is to win. They're 0-3 in one-score games, to start the year, started 0-3. And it's a lot of turnover luck, right? Like turnover is a lot of what that is. Start off this game, first play of the game, Justin Reed forces a fumble. I mean, the Vikings are, it's an interesting time, an interesting team to be a fan of. Chiefs know that very well, but we've kind of gotten past that, those crazy curses. But speaking of the game and just maybe Vikings fans, it drives me crazy, Caleb, as we always get up on a Monday morning, we get up on our on our TLs, we're scrolling, and it's just crazy to me how often, and this game is one of them to me, how often we see the officiating get brought up, in the post-game talk of this. I hate talking about officiating, so we're not going to talk about it much after this, but it's just crazy to me, Caleb. Like, how do you watch that game and see, that the officiating was super leaning on the Chiefs side? The Vikings had 4 penalties called on them. The Chiefs had 10. The Chiefs had 1 drive with 4 penalties called on them, which we'll talk about. I actually kind of like what we saw from that, but I don't know, Caleb. I mean, does it drive you crazy like it does me? Just like how often we have to, counter officiating takes, and in the wake of a Chiefs win.
The Chiefs have been called for 33 penalties this year, which ties them for 9th. So this take that they're getting every call isn't backed up by anything, considering they're actually one of the most penalized teams in the entire NFL this year. And look, man, I get it. There's going to be a couple of those plays where Justin Jefferson's going to get his superstar call. Travis Kelce gets them too. It happens.
Yep.
Okay, they're throwing defensive line holdings on Tershawn Wharton for taking on a double team. I'm like, oh, so this is what kind of game this is. Because, by law, you can't hold if you're a defensive lineman, but let's go watch every double team throughout the course of the entire NFL season and look at it. I mean, I'm not a big blame the refs guy. That's just not, I've never really been like that, even when the Chiefs are getting a bunch of whack calls going their way. But I mean, just to sit here and say, well, this series of plays that got penalized, that changed the outcome of the game. Number one, no game ever comes down to just one play. And number two, it's there's so much more going on than just a couple of calls going your way here or there. So I don't get it. It's just what, people don't like it because the Chiefs are consistently winning, and that's really the only thing they can bring them down on.
I know, it just drives me, and even within the Jawan Taylor situation, we still get people, trying to come out, like the Jets last week, with Ahmad Gardner. And it's just, this week, we get L'Jarius Sneed's, late game taking off his helmet, not getting penalized for it. That's all of a sudden this conspiracy because the referee, advised him to put it back on. That's not some crazy rigged, NFL rigged thing. That's just a referee what he's supposed to do. Referees are supposed to warn people before they flag, and once it gets excessive, that's when it becomes a flag. Actually, if you remember from the Broncos game last year, Jerry Jeudy pulls off his helmet, does not get penalized. In the wake of the game, though, in the next week, he did get a fine, which that is probably what's going to happen to L'Jarius Sneed, because you aren't supposed to take your helmet off in the play. But even if they did penalize him there, Chiefs still had the ball. Chiefs were still going to end up and win. It's just and we're done talking about it after this. It's just hilarious to me, and that overshadows sometimes the big parts of the game, Caleb. But we like talking ball here, Caleb. So I don't know. Any other takes before we get into the rest of this?
I got none on that, man. Let's talk about actual football and not what people wish had happened.
That's what I bring you on for. And for anyone who doesn't know, Caleb helps me, and Nate Christensen as well joins us on the AP Film Room on the Arrowhead Pride YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking that out. We go live on Tuesday evenings. Actually, it'll just be Caleb and I tomorrow night. Nate's busy, so you're going to get the same duo breaking down the X's and O's, talking about the actual film of the game, the All 22, live on the Arrowhead Pride YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages Tuesday night. So make sure you're checking that out. And make sure you ask us questions here on the podcast. We always take them on the Monday morning after the game, answer them for you here on the show. We'll do that in the second half of the show later on. You can ask them on Twitter. We send out a prompt, or you can email them to apoutofstructure@gmail.com. If you do so, we will take them in and answer them on the following show. Again, though, we will do that later in the show. We're going to be doing a little bit of breakdown of this previous game, this Chiefs-Vikings game, what we saw on the field. Caleb, I know you're kind of digging into the defensive film, but we're going to start out on the offensive side of the ball. I do the Insta breakdown for the sites, and on Sunday we saw, another kind of weird game from the offense to an extent. We saw the run game come out hot. The pass game was very spread out. Nobody over 100 receiving yards, a lot of different players, catching. But I did have to give offensive player of the game to the Yeti, to Travis Kelce, who scared us all, gave us a pretty big scare with that injury, Caleb, but came back out in the second half, could not be denied, refused to be, kept on the sideline, and had 3 big-time catches on one drive. It was actually the Chiefs' last touchdown drive, led them to go up 27-13. They held on to that score. But, just what are your takes on the Travis Kelce kind of gutsy performance and just what the offense had to do to gut it out on Sunday?
That was a terrifying moment, because a lot of the time when you see those non-contact injuries, it's never anything good. And I'm no lower extremity expert. I'm sure every doctor, every Twitter doctor, armchair physician was telling everyone what they thought happened. I was assuming worst case scenario just because it's the non-contact, which I guess we're going to assume it's a low ankle sprain at this point. But I mean,
that's what they're calling it, by the way. The team has come out and called it a low ankle sprain on Monday, so just officially.
Yeah. And man, it was just one of those games where it's like, yeah, they weren't going to force him to go back in there, but you saw how much it meant for him to get back in the game. And it's crazy to think about, because the Chiefs are 3-1 still. I mean, even if they had dropped this game versus the Vikings, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. It would have been another out of conference loss, and they have still had, plenty of time to make up ground versus the other teams of the AFC, which there's some teams not doing a very good job in the rest of the AFC right now. But I mean, just the grit and toughness to come back in, and not only come back in, I'm like, well, maybe they'll put him in and he'll just be the decoy. Like, they'll put him in to draw the bodies, and then maybe get it to someone else. And they end up going down. He scores a touchdown, and he makes another one of the biggest catches of the game, makes one of the best catches of his career with that circus catch where O'Connell burned the timeout for no reason.
Yeah, that was a terrible challenge.
Yeah, you see a lot what the Chiefs are made of when you see what Mahomes and Kelce go through week in and week out. Like, they do lay out, they do put their bodies on the line every week. So I mean, we should all be appreciative for that. And I mean, really, that felt like the kind of spark that came out and sparked the offense, because Kelce didn't go in that first half, the first drive of the first half, right? We actually saw some second half, yeah, but we actually saw some of the other players on the roster actually recognize, okay, Kelce's out, we got to step up and go.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. That first drive of the second half, they came out and scored a touchdown, but Kelce never took the field. He crept onto the field. They had to bring him back. That was kind of when you saw him kept kind of getting pulled back. But that's when Rasheed had a 13-yard catch at one point. That's when MVS finally made his presence felt, had a 12-yard catch, and then Rasheed had the touchdown, which was a great play. We'll talk about them a little later, but I do want to stick on Travis because we don't see him get injured a lot or get banged up a lot. Like it is a rare occurrence this year, seeing him kind of having to play through injury, and that's what he just doesn't get credit enough for, Caleb. And I know you know it, you just spoke to it, but when he gets these comparisons to Gronk, he's called like the finessed, the finesse dude, the kind of the softer dude. Gronk's the hard nosed dude. Gronk got injured a lot and couldn't play through a lot of his injuries. Kelce, grit, is grinding out through these injuries. And I'm not trying to compare their toughness necessarily, but just to say that, Kelce's a tough ass dude too, just like Gronk is. He should get more credit for that. He just doesn't get injured. Like they didn't have to wear these big braces on his knees and elbows because he's getting banged up all the time. He takes care of his body a little better, and over his long career. So shout out Travis and his three catches on that second drive of the second half, all very impactful, big plays, and all kind of made by him to an extent. So 3rd and 7, Mahomes stepping up in the pocket, man coverage, Kelce's covered. He just gives him a chance anyway, and that's the play you're talking about where O'Connell challenges it because the ball comes out after he's down. Just a great tough catch in traffic. The second one though, 3rd and 8 in the red zone, right? Mahomes actually talked about it in the post game. They were trying to fake the defense out, kind of giving Kelce a quick screen look and seeing if they'd pull up the defense and have Tony sneak out, up the sideline after, or above it, I should say. Didn't work. Defense kind of sunk under Tony. Mahomes kind of didn't know what to do with the ball. And he kind of creeps up in the pocket. And he even said this in the post game. He said, I know I'm about to get hit. Like that's what was going through his head. He turns to the left. All of a sudden, he sees Kelce streaking right at him because Kelce, improvising on his route like we know he can do at his best, is streaking towards him, gets the ball like a basketball pass, like a quick chest pass, and gets it for a first down. And then a couple plays later, sits in the perfect zone window to score the touchdown. It was just a vintage Kelce drive, and it was great to see. But it was really the only impact he had on the game. Honestly, outside of that, he didn't do much. Caleb, what else from the offense was impressive for you on Sunday outside of Kelce?
It's kind of hard to pick. I mean, we already touched on the running game. I wish they would have finished the game a little stronger, but also, I mean, they started just to play the run at the end there because, the Chiefs were just trying to kill some clock towards the end of the game.
But how about that first drive though, Caleb? Like I know you noticed that the O line popping out, the interior offensive line, particularly kind of making some yardage, and Pacheco, man, really still continuing to look better and better to me. I don't know, is this run game getting better to you week by week?
I think it is, and I think this week was like the first time you saw Pacheco look slippery in there. Like we've
Yeah.
had a lot of
Yes.
games. We've had a lot of games where like he gets to the hole and it's this big massive hole because Smith and Creed and everyone in there, they've just blown it open and then he gets tackled. This week the Vikings were like condensing down a little bit more. They weren't like the Chiefs are still getting movement, but they're condensing the holes, they're tightening the gaps down, but he's like just going in there and he's just slipping off of guys, breaking through arm tackles. And the Chiefs, the Chiefs have played, that was a good defense in the Jets they played last week. And he had a big game. And this week, he came out and they started out hot. They ran that little wildcat look. That was fun.
Yeah.
Where they just kind of, let him go in there and they just run it right up the middle on them. I mean, yeah. And I mean,
Yeah,
they just came out hot. And I mean, the offensive line was firing off the ball. They were creating a lot of movement. They were fired up and ready to play. I mean, that's how this team's got to play when you're struggling at receiver like they are. They're going to have to lean into the run game a little bit more early on in this season, even though we're kind of getting towards the middle point.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that about Pacheco. I really feel like he is progressing in terms of being patient, kind of picking and choosing when to hit it, and not necessarily, being so stop and start and being so rigid. I feel like he is getting smoother, like you mentioned. I mean, and it's not the only example of it from the game, but you actually had that one play where the broadcaster, excuse me, Jim Nance, kind of says, "Oh, he looked like Le'Veon Bell on that play," because he was very patient with kind of seeing where his blocks would work, and he kind of just muddled his way into 5 or 6 yards. That's what you want to see from a guy that's going to have to play both in the downhill run scheme and the zone run scheme that the Chiefs like to run. So it's just good to see Pacheco kind of playing more comfortably. But let's talk about the defense too, because that was really the highlight of the game to me, for a lot of people. Even though I think there were some ups and downs, right? But the defensive backfield, just the way they were handling the Vikings pass game, from Justin Jefferson to T.J. Hawkinson, even to Jordan Anderson to an extent. L'Jarius Sneed had the plays on Jefferson a lot of the time, right, Caleb? But I actually had Trent McDuffie end up as my defensive player of the game, because he ended up with 6 tackles, which was 4th on the team, but 3 of them were stops, which is a PFF stat for tackles that constitute a failure for the offense. 3 stops was the second most on the team. 3 quarterback hits for Trent McDuffie on 4 pass rushes. McDuffie racked up 3 quarterback hits, and he also was playing pretty well in coverage. Had that one rep in good coverage of Justin Jefferson, where Mike Edwards came over and almost picked it off. What did you see from the defense, the defensive backfield maybe, but also just the back end? I know there's a few players that stood out to you.
And I have a feeling tomorrow when we do the film room, like, we're going to be putting on a clinic, because there's a lot of teach tape for what the Chiefs secondary did.
Love it.
But you bring it all up, McDuffie was excellent. So was Sneed. Mike Edwards might be the best safety on the roster, even though Justin Reed, friend of the show, did a very good job to strip the ball or knock the ball out the first play of the game. Yes. We'll give him that. But I'm gonna focus on the linebackers, because you mentioned it a second ago. Like, obviously, it's Justin Jefferson's the guy they want to stop, right? Well, T.J. Hawkinson was the guy they were trying to go to next, and he was where they tried to create more explosive plays, because very rarely in the Spags era has one receiver just killed them through the course of the game. You think about the Jamar Chase game, and then like what Gabe Davis did in the divisional round game. Those are like really the only 2 games that stand out where a receiver has just beat them bad. So you knew they were going to have something, but who stepped up to stop Hawkinson a lot of the time was Drew Tranquill, and he was excellent in coverage. He led the team in tackles also, but he was so fluid and so smooth finding Hawkinson, who is one of the elite route running tight ends in the NFL, where it might have been a mismatch for a lot of other Chiefs linebackers. He was just so smooth where he was able to get to, and he's just, I don't know, his athletic range kind of, he's built for a game like that. I still think he could do better just against downhill run scheme type stuff. But when he's like out there in coverage or going sideline to sideline, I mean, he's like that feels like a giant blunder the Chargers made letting him go, because he fits the Chiefs system so much better than whatever they've been trying to run in, Los Angeles the last few seasons. But when he's just like that Mike linebacker, I don't know, man, he was super impressive. Like, he's doing stuff that isn't showing up in the stat book also. I mean, he's my defensive player of the game.
Yeah, he had that one pass breakup up the seam to Hawkinson that was just very, just trailed him very well and played it very well. It was a similar play to the one from the week before. I actually showed it on the film room against the Jets. Zach Wilson and the tight end just made the play, but it was still great coverage. He is covering very well, and we will talk a little more about him and Nick Bolton, kind of how they're going to handle that a little later on. But to stay on this game particularly, L'Jarius Sneed, he just continues to bully wide receiver ones into low production games. He's gotten penalties, right? He got penalties this week. He got penalties on Calvin Ridley, but no matter how you slice it, it is a good thing that the Chiefs that the Vikings are only getting 28 yards out of Justin Jefferson and 3 catches. It's a good thing that the Jaguars offense was only able to produce 32 yards out of Calvin Ridley on 2 catches. No matter how you slice it, no matter if there are 2 plays in there where there's a penalty and maybe it's a defensive pass interference, those plays are technically like 15-yard catches, but you're still throwing those receivers off their game. I mean, you saw on that one drive I referenced earlier where there was 4 penalties on the defensive backs, which the Justin Reed one was kind of silly. I mean, he swings everybody to the ground when he tackles them. He's been doing it. He does it every tackle. If you watch Justin Reed, which, that's a questionable choice to tackle every single time, but that's another story. But my thing is just that you like to see what Snead does at the line of scrimmage, beating up wide receivers, jamming them. And the thing is, he's able to get away with it more than other corners in kind of today's modern NFL, because a lot of the best cover corners that can trail and still stick with you in coverage, even after maybe you get by them and press to an extent, they're not as big and as long, right? Like the ones that can really stick with you, the ones that can press you are going to get lost if you get past them in press coverage. Snead is in that zone where he's a little bit of the best of both worlds, and it's kind of why it's working right now. Obviously, though, they're giving him a lot of help. The safeties right now, that Spags is deploying them very well. He's putting McDuffie in one-on-one situations and kind of having maybe a safety help more with Snead. I think Spags is just dialing it up right now, Caleb. So any other defensive take? How's the pass rush? Was the defensive line kind of too quiet for your liking? I know you were kind of hoping for a big game from them heading into it.
Yeah, I wrote about the defensive line versus their offensive line before the game, and I thought it should have been a much better performance. Chris Jones got the sack. He was from the interior. He was double teamed pretty much every play. And the one time he got free when they tried to single block him, he quickly beat the guard for a sack. It was like snap your fingers fast. Cousins didn't even have time to get through a read. I don't know, man. It just kind of felt like the way they had been looking. Karlaftis has been getting closer week by week, and Dana's been improving week by week. And Dana did come up at the very end. He got a couple of other pressures there. I just felt like it was going to be a game where they could have really gotten off and teed off on Cousins a little bit more. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. I was starting to get frustrated with how much Chris was lining up on the outside, because it has worked a lot this season. I didn't really think from the feel of the game that it was working out well this time, but it's kind of making me start to think, though, that they're getting him ready for when Omenihu does come back, because they're going to have probably Chris and him on the same side of the line of scrimmage, and probably put Dana and Karlaftis, or some combination of Dana, Karlaftis, FAU on the other side. And it's going to be nasty whenever they get both of those guys, because there's going to be some good one-on-one matchups in there somewhere. They're just going to have to exploit. So I was a little bit disappointed in the pass rush this week, to be honest.
Did you hear Chris Jones on the Travis Kelce podcast, or the New Heights podcast, by any chance, talk about he was talking about kind of how he prefers playing to the outside, because it's much harder to truly double team, someone to the outside, right? And it makes sense, right? You can chip somebody, but chipping, especially on a guy that big, sometimes doesn't really do much, especially if it's just a running back. He can get through it pretty quick. He was kind of talking about how, on the inside, I get the double. They can double team me pretty easy if they really want to, and there's nothing too much I can do about it on a rush down. And so, I really think that on pass rush downs, they're kind of allowing Chris to be pretty, free or flexible with where he's aligning up, and it's kind of, and the rest of the pass rush kind of has to align off of him right now. But I'm with you. I don't really like him doing it too much to the outside if the offensive tackle isn't just a crazy mismatch like it was the first couple times first couple games he was back, right? I think they just need to find the weakest link on the line and put him against Chris every time and let the other guys kind of exploit off of that. But it is interesting, because I do think maybe Chris kind of shared with us that he truly prefers to play from the edge when he wants to rush and get a sack. And if it's a good enough offensive tackle, it's not always going to end up in a win like we saw in Jacksonville and Chicago. So I don't know, any other thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. You remember 21, he came in, he was like leaned down. He was trying to be like a true defensive end.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have like that lateral quickness. But when he does win on the outside, he's winning with like overwhelming power that these tackles just aren't used to, because when he's like at his heaviest, like his best playing weight is he probably is like close to 330, even though they probably only list him at 315. He's a big guy. He's 6'6", so he carries it really well. But I mean, when he's beating up on those rookie tackles or beating up on like Mekhi Becton, it's because like those guys aren't used to having someone their same height and length be able just to bully them like that. Because usually if someone's like 6'6" like that, they're moving a lot more differently, not quite running through you. But
right.
that's kind of where I thought
With that length too.
yeah. I thought kind of though Darisaw and O'Neal, I thought they were both more or less ready for that this week.
They're
Though
solid. That's a solid tackle duo. I mean, Darisaw's good. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was doing like my writing and stuff, I thought they were going to try to pick on the interior guys a lot more. So, maybe it's just something, it's hindsight. They're not going to see the Vikings again for a while, but it is what it is.
Well, and they do have a short week coming up. I don't know. I didn't look too hard in the snap counts to see if anyone was too limited. I don't know if Chris was limited at all. Maybe kind of, preserving them for a short week. But before we get, I got a couple panic button meters that I got to ask about here. This is where we can talk about, we can talk about maybe one of the underlying storylines of this game, and it's Sky Moore, and the fact that panic button meter wise, I think we definitely have to have it out here, and we definitely have to be pressing it, and the fact that he just may not be, he may just be getting overlapped, I think is the way to put it, by Rashee Rice. I think this back-to-back years of second round picks at wide receiver, I think in theory, Sky was supposed to do one set of skills and talents, and Rashee was supposed to do kind of another maybe set of skills and talents, and they were supposed to work in tandem well together. But I think we're getting to the point where Rashee is doing the things that he was supposed to do, pretty well, obviously, but now is also showing that he can do the things Sky can do at receiver. And that's not necessarily good when you also have all these other receivers that fill different roles, and you can't just say, okay, well, if Sky's not going to be able to do the things that we kind of penciled him in to do, we can put him somewhere else. Well, no, you have Tony that fills that role. You have Justin Watson that fills that role. You have MVS, obviously, that's going to play, all the, the most snaps of the receiver room. To me, if this offense right now wants to be at its best, Rashee Rice should be playing the majority of the snaps in the slot over Sky Moore, which Sky has been phased out of the slot more and more as the season's gone on. But I think the best receiver trio right now is Rashee, Kadarius, and maybe and either Justin Watson or MVS as kind of that deep threat, Z or X on the outside. That's that best 11 personnel right now to me. Caleb, I don't know. How are you feeling about Sky and Rashee, kind of just how they kind of maybe coexist in this offense?
It's unfortunate for Sky because I still think there's something there. They just don't have time to wait right now. Like they don't have time to give him these reps. I mean, they're getting ready to be in week 6. So you're at this point, they have to start figuring out what they're going to do. What's their plan? Because pretty soon it's going to be December. And when you get to December in the NFL, you're starting to look to January if you're going to make it that far. And if you're in January and you're winning a lot of games, you got to sit down and start to think and say, yeah, we're going to have a chance to go to the Super Bowl this year. So we have to start figuring out who our guys are. And the big receiver rotation's fun in camp because you see a lot of different guys. It creates a lot of conversation.
Right.
It's fun in the preseason. Now's the time to start shrinking it down. Last season was worked well where they could distribute the ball around a lot because they had Juju, who was a good professional football receiver. He fit Andy Reid's system well for having a big strong guy that can play in the slot, do different things like that. And right now they're struggling, right? Justin Watson's probably better than MVS is right now. Pat probably trusts him a little bit more.
I think that's true.
I mean, it's crazy. People are saying it's crazy. I don't think it is. You take a look at their production and who Pat's throwing the ball to on these deep balls. It's clearly he's liking what Watson's doing. He's liking whether it's just him fighting back for the ball. It's something in there, but it's not a good situation for Sky. I mean, I'm sure they'll find something to do. If anything, this year he's going to still be quality depth. But right now, if Rice is flashing like this, you got to get him going. And also, I don't think it was by surprise that Justin Ross found his way into the game. Now, you saw the high end and you saw the low end of what he can be. The high end when they're got him on like the backside and he's isolated one-on-one versus small receiver, he's going to make some plays. The low end is he's got to be consistently good enough. And people are like, well, they got to get him the ball for him to be consistently good enough. I'm like, dude, you have to take advantage of your chances when Mahomes gives them to you in the game, or he's not going to trust you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's gotten a higher, target to snap ratio in their lives than Justin Ross. I mean, every time he's on the field, he's getting a target, and if he's not on the that's the only time he's on the field. It seems like. I mean, you can't say that. You're 100% right. Justin Ross, had the 2 drops. One of them was tougher than the other. One of them, the last one, the second one, definitely needed to be caught on that Hank route. The curl route over the middle. But yeah, I agree that cover 2 hole shot where he catches it over the corner. That was beautiful. They motioned into a 4x1 set, that kind of held the safety for a little bit, and Mahomes just put it exactly where he wanted. But seeing how high Ross got on that, if you kind of just focus on like where Ross is catching the ball, like up in the air on the all 22, it's pretty impressive, man. And it's exciting to have that in the offense. But to kind of just finish the Sky conversation, man, it's just becoming pretty obvious to me that Sky Moore is being used like McCole Hardman in terms of, kind of being the jet motion guy most of the time, being the decoy route a lot of the times. But Sky Moore isn't a McCole Hardman talent where he has this game-breaking speed that if you hand it to him on a jet and you miss, one defender doesn't get over in time, he's going to take it to that. No, Sky doesn't have that kind of game-breaking ability. And he also just, that just doesn't, it limits you in that role. And if he's not doing that, and you have all these other guys, kind of maybe making more plays like a Tony, obviously, and Rice from the slot. Yeah, it's to me, yeah, he's becoming, someone that, like you just mentioned, is just maybe going to be quality depth for right now for this season. And, Rashid's going to emerge. And so I'm excited but the team has to let him emerge. And so, to answer Thomas Ramirez's question, always asking good questions. He said, should Rice and Moore switch snap counts from here on out? I truly believe so. I think Sky should be playing a limited snap count, and Rice should be the one playing, 50, 60% of the time. That's about what Sky's been playing, the last couple games. JC Proctor at JC Ramon JC on Twitter. He had to throw this out there. How can we get less Moore and more Rice? I'll take my answer off air. Thank you. Shout out JC Proctor. Yes, I think we are headed that direction. We're going to get less Moore and more Rice. And I have a few tweets already out on Twitter. If you check out my TL, kind of showing where Sky could have taken advantage more in this game. Because it's not just, there is an argument to be made that the Chiefs aren't giving him enough opportunities for him to show his talents. But, I think just like the Justin Ross thing, you got to take advantage of the opportunities when you get them. And I think Sky's got enough opportunities to not show what he has not shown to this point. But one more panic button meter before we get to break, Caleb. I got to ask you, your guy Nick Bolton. It's been 2 weeks since we've seen him on the field, and in those 2 weeks, you have done a very good job of highlighting how good Drew Tranquill has been playing, and I think everyone can see. What does that kind of look like when Bolton comes back? Because you can't just necessarily take someone playing that well in that Mike position off the field, and Drew will probably play maybe some of the dime stuff, right? But I don't know. What are your take on how it can look when Bolton gets back healthy?
I don't think this is a bad thing at all. And I like no one that actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to football thought bringing in Drew Tranquill is going to be a bad thing. Like, I think we were having like a conversation off air when they made the signing for it, and it was like some shock, like no one expected it. And
Right.
we're all like, well, this is probably going to end up really well because linebacker is a physical spot. And Nick Bolton, for the first time in his career, is missing a stretch of games. He played like 99% of the snaps last season. That's unsustainable.
Yeah.
So if you're going by like kind of like a committee idea, it is good to be able to manage snap counts and be able to do this kind of thing. Those guys are really good at doing different kinds of things, though. This game against Minnesota was tailor-made for a guy like Tranquill, where he's going against a really athletic tight end. He's going to have to play a lot in coverage. When the Eagles come to town in a few weeks, is that necessarily where he's going to shine, having to stop like the downhill run game? No, but that's where Nick Bolton kind of makes his bread and butter at. moving forward, it's going to be like a lot of, matchup decisions for Spags where he's going to have to figure out on a game by game basis how he wants to break down their snaps. And I think Tranquill's versatile enough to really play wherever they do want to put him. So he'll probably cut more into Willie Gay snaps as the will backer in some instances out of base. And he's also like physical enough to where he can spell Leo also, but then he'll be able to spell Bolton. I think we'll see like just kind of this matchup by matchup deal. I'd assume when they play the Chargers, if Austin Eckler is there and healthy, or if any of those running backs are healthy and they need someone to kind of spy Herbert, I would say we're probably going to see a big dose of Tranquil. Like that'll be in 10 days or whatever it's going to be. So I don't see how it's a bad thing. There's no reason to hit the panic button for having too many talented middle linebackers in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you went that direction because I think you mentioned the health part of it. Spags has already talked about it, how they are rotating these guys with purpose because they want all four to get enough snaps to play and feel like contributors, but also to keep all of them rested and none of them too fatigued. You mentioned Bolton 99% of the snaps. There's no reason to do that because you know what that does is it makes him tired on half the snaps. It makes him tired on third down when he's supposed to be chasing the tight end out to the flat. Makes him tired on the ensuing first down after he just did that, and now all of a sudden he's not as good in the run defense because he's exhausted. It makes the defense better to have fresh linebackers at all points. So good points there. All right, let's send it to break on this. Always doing my what NFL player am I game. This week we're talking about a player that played for the Chiefs and the Broncos, Caleb. So you have to guess who this player is. And he was a 7th round pick by Denver. He was famous as a part of a dynamic running back trio in college. He only played 1 year for the Chiefs later on, but he was most famous for being on the cover of Madden. Who am I referring to? I'm going to see if Caleb can answer that on the other side. We'll see you then. All right, we are back on the AP Out of Structure podcast. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you joining. I did my NFL player. What NFL player am I? Riddle at the break, and Caleb. I think I got Caleb. I think I stumped Caleb. Do you have an answer for me here?
I do not. I have no idea.
Yeah, it was Peyton Hillis, famous Chiefs running back, famous fullback, famous Madden cover athlete. He was drafted by Denver, and he played running back and linebacker for them for a few years. Then with Cleveland, popped off for a 1,000-yard season. Apparently, that's enough to get you on the Madden cover. So shout out Peyton Hillis. Played for the Chiefs in probably the worst year in franchise history, 2012. But wanted to get a tough one out there for the people. So shout out anyone that got that one.
Yeah, him and Jamal Charles is supposed to be like lightning and thunder that year, and then Jamal got hurt, and there was no thunder.
It was just a clear skies in terms of how to defend the Chiefs offense that day. It was pretty clear, or that year. So shout out the 2012 Chiefs. 11 years later, we are very thankful for what the Chiefs look like now. And we are very thankful for you people sending in questions for us to answer on the podcast tonight. Jake Wilson at Jake for Now on Twitter always asks some great questions. And today, Caleb, he brings to us this. Are Chiefs fans paying too little attention to Casey's development of the run game and its impact on clock management? Interesting question here, considering, time of possession is always something that Chiefs fans can kind of laugh at. It's like, hey, we have Patrick Mahomes. We don't care about time of possession. We're going to score as quickly as we need to. And, it's not, we care about the points on the board, not the time of possession. But, Caleb, is there anything to the Chiefs kind of maybe needing to lean on the run game and kind of maybe lean into clock management a little more with the current version of the offense?
I don't know necessarily about the clock management thing as much. That stat just kind of goes wishy-washy. It's like one of those old ball coach stats that like they go, see, look, we run the clock control. I'm like, yeah, but 10 other things also happened. But yeah, there's definitely something to the running game, like them having to lean on it. And why not? You have an excellent interior offensive line. Pacheco's a budding running back. I've certainly feel like I've done enough running game analysis that, I mean, it's definitely something they've developed. People should be paying attention to it because it's going to be a giant roll down the season goes as they continue to try to figure out what's wrong with the passing attack.
So you don't buy into, though, like, if the passing attack's going to be this sluggish all year, like, do they need to, and they already don't play tempo, right? Mahomes, the Chiefs never really run tempo where they're hurrying to the line of scrimmage, without obviously 2-minute, 4-minute drill kind of things. But you don't think if the pass offense is going to look this sluggish that, hey, maybe there is something to, just eating the clock, avoiding incomplete passes, and really just grinding it out. Like, could the Chiefs benefit from turning into one of those teams just like situationally? I've always thought so, but like they may need to like actually do it this year instead of just like, it being kind of a luxury.
Yeah, this week they almost pulled off a perfect 4-minute drill. They came up just short on it. 4-minute drill, you have the ball with 4 minutes to go. You got to kill the clock. You think about last week, though, against the Jets, yeah, there were a lot of penalties on that last drive, but they held the ball for 8 minutes to end the game. It wasn't
Right.
maybe not quite 8 minutes. They held the ball for a long time, like 16 plays to end the game. So there's definitely something to that in some situations. It definitely puts pressure on people. The thing I like most about what they're doing with the run game is there's been these play action passes have not worked for them for like 2 seasons because no one's actually thought they were going to run the ball. They haven't worked for them for a while. Eventually, at some point, they're going to bust them back open because teams are eventually going to get tired of being gashed in the mouth by Pacheco and they're going to have to come up with something. So I think we're just kind of buying time till that day comes, which hopefully will be pretty soon.
No, it's a good point because, NFL defensive coaches are not just going to bank on what your reputation is. They're saying they want to bank on what they're seeing this season. And if you're watching the Chiefs offense this year, you may want to heat up Mahomes. You may want to, test him and play one high coverages and kind of, crowd the line of scrimmage and not let that run game go in and get into 3rd and 10s. I don't think, I don't know the stats on their 3rd and 10 efficiency. Although I will say they are the number 1 team in 3rd down this year. I saw that almost 52% conversion on 3rd down overall. So maybe this isn't the right way to say this, but just in terms of, defensive coaches are going to get risky with how they defend the Chiefs offense and do or die games. And so I'm interested to see, who's going to really, the Vikings were maybe going to be one of those teams that test him with a lot of blitzes, but they did a really good job of blitzing, but maybe not necessarily sending more than 4 rushers. Doing a lot of zone blitzes, a lot of, fire zone, even 3-man rushes where they had a DN drop out into a short flat, a short zone coverage. It did trip them up a little bit at times but they prevailed, and shout out the Chiefs for doing that. But yeah, I do think this offense may, while the receivers, we've been talking about this, but it is real that this Chiefs offense does need to lean on the run game while the receivers kind of, get through their development, and we'll see if they can do it quicker than slower. We'll see. Thomas Shamir has asked an earlier question. He asked another one here. What was more impressive, the secondary locking down Justin Jefferson and the receivers, or the offensive line playing a full game clean and penalty free? Which one do you want to give a game ball to if you had to pick between one or the other?
I'll go with the secondary this week. I thought they were good. Jefferson dropped some passes too there, but it's hard to take away too much from them. And, with that stuff from the offensive line, it's crazy, but you kind of expect it. They can't go every game where they're just getting called for everything. And this week they did let them play. They let them play up front on both sides of the ball this week. There's a little bit going on. I don't know if you caught it at the end of the game, but Juwan was getting a little quick there towards the end of the game. But Donovan was also. So they're definitely they sync that up a little bit and better now to where they can't get it called. So they can't really target one of them. But you got to give it to the DBs though. That was just something else.
Yeah, no, you have to because even the safeties. You already mentioned Mike Edwards, Justin Reed. Spag shouted out Mike Edwards. He is playing more. Typically, you see the Chiefs' 2 starting safeties both play the same amount of snaps because, right, they're obviously both going to be on the field every snap for the most part. You're seeing Justin Reed still have that high snap count, but Brian Cook's drop, and it's because I think in pass down nickel formations they are having Mike Edwards in over Brian Cook, which I think tells you they like Mike Edwards to be, more in those pass situations over a Brian Cook. And you're seeing why, man. He gets over the top of receivers all the time. Like I mean, I don't know if it's just receiver or quarterbacks not, respecting his range, but I mean, the last couple of weeks we've seen him get over the top of vertical routes and well, I will say the Jets game, it was, I highlighted it on in our AP film, but it was Snead kind of jamming Garrett Wilson so hard that there was no route on that side to read, so he kind of had a free range there. But I will say to Thomas's question, he asked about the O-line playing a full game clean, penalty free. It was nice to see the penalty free part, but they did give up a couple sacks. One of them I did see on the film. I didn't get through the whole offensive film today, but it was a play action shot. Hunter loops around from the outside and it just catches, Creed off guard. He just isn't able to pick it up in time. And honestly, there was an open receiver downfield, but Hunter's just so big. He just takes up Mahomes' throwing vision, and Mahomes just can't see it and kind of just succumbs to it. So, it wasn't a bad game from the offensive line at all. I love what we saw on the ground from them. But, in pass protection, it could have been cleaner, could have been better. But again, the Chiefs got around it. The Chiefs did what they needed to do to get it done. And the Vikings, they have some players. Davenport's in there too, Marcus Davenport. They have some guys that can get after the quarterback off the edge. So I don't know, any other offensive line notes. Now we're just talking O-line real quick before we move on.
I honestly, I thought a lot of the sacks they did give up, I thought was probably, Mahomes was holding the ball for a little bit on some of those. You mentioned some of the issues. That's right. One of those areas where like the receivers, I think, are spilling out, but they're still working in there. I mean, that's everyone's game plan every single week is to, you have to get home with pass rushers to have any chance to stop the Chiefs. The Vikings did it just enough to keep it close.
Yes, they did. All right, Kevin Kaling at Kansas Comet on Twitter. He asked a pretty interesting question here, talking about L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones. If Chris Jones requires roughly $30 million next year and Sneed is around $17 million, I believe he's referring to the franchise tag, with these numbers. Which do you choose? And so he's basically asking you if you had to use a franchise tag or one or the other. And let's just live in a hypothetical world where they're fine playing on the tag, so you're not really worried about them holding out like we saw from Chris Jones this year. Which one would you choose? Caleb, would you rather have that elite pass rusher kind of later in his career, Chris Jones, or would you rather have Sneed, who might be ascending as an outside cornerback, a true shutdown cornerback right now?
I would still keep it with Chris Jones, and I know it's a ton of money for just 1 year, but I mean, you don't really have to lock in anything long term with a tag like that. He's getting an astronomical amount of money for 1 season, and as good as everyone in the secondary and linebackers looks, that defense still revolves around what happens to 95 playing and play out up front. Like, it's not always the most flashy, fun thing to talk about. The dude's had a sack every game this season. He is on a tear.
That is crazy.
Like, that's something it's so expected. And honestly, the Chiefs probably aren't hyping it up enough for a reason, because his price tag is skyrocketing drastically by the minute because they didn't pay him the first time. He's a little angry right now. But when you're looking at this, if he keeps at this pace like this could be the greatest season a defensive tackle has ever had. Possibly he could outshine Aaron Donald, because there's some bad O-lines coming up. Like, there's a chance that these 1-sack games could turn into 2-sack games. And, his name's going to be up there with the sack leaders for the entire league by the time this thing's over.
They played Denver twice in the next 3 games, if I'm not mistaken. And let's just say that quarterback in Denver, he's pretty susceptible to the sack, and their offensive line isn't crazy over there. No, I think it's an interesting point on Chris, man. A sack in every game. There's elite pass rushers that go 2, 3, 4 games without a sack, and you just it's just part of the game, right? Because it is hard to get a sack. And Chris Jones, just you can bank on him getting a sack every game, and he actually does have the NFL record for back in 2018. I think it was 11 straight games he had a sack, and so he's known for going on these streaks, and this is what he does. So shout out Chris, keep it up. L'Jarius, though, I do think he is playing at at a level that I think after the season he is going to get top cornerback money on the free agent market. I didn't think he would maybe before this season. I thought it might have been a mistake on his part to kind of maybe play more outside corner. And it's not his choice necessarily, but to play more outside corner than slot because I think he's more of a playmaker in the slot. But he's proving that his combination of athleticism and size and length is what you want at your outside cornerback, and it's exactly what is. But I do think the point though you make with Chris Jones, everything revolves around Chris Jones. I think to even peel that back a little more, I think your secondary, as long as you have Steve Spagnuolo as your defensive coordinator, you're going to have talented secondary players because he's going to develop them and he's going to play them to their best ability. And don't be surprised if in 3-4 years, Chamari Connor's a guy that we're talking about. Do they need to sign to a big deal or not by the time of his end of his rookie deal? He just churns these guys out, and so I think you sign the pass rushers and you develop defensive backs as much as possible. And Snead is just Snead is a very talented dude, but I think he's reaching his ceiling because Spags is a great coach, and shout out Dave Merritt too, great coach as well. But yeah, I think Spags is a DB whisperer. He doesn't get credit enough for that. I don't think. I think he gets. Caleb, like it's funny, like Spags gets known for like the the NASCAR pass rush package from the Super Bowl, the Giants Patriots Super Bowl, but like his bread and butter is the defensive backfield. That's really where he grew up, and I mean, we're seeing it in Kansas City. I mean, he's really developing a bunch of DBs, and he's done it over and over and over.
Yeah, his ability to kind of go from teaching man coverage, zone coverage, and kind of intertwine it all into one is kind of where the magic of all that comes from.
Well, Caleb, let's round it out here. We do have a Thursday night game this week. The Chiefs are hosting the Denver Broncos in Arrowhead. A fun game, hopefully, for the Chiefs because this Broncos team is bad. And, I'm not just saying that because I hate the Denver Broncos and hate their colors and the look of their logo and everything. But the Broncos are 1-4. Their only win was in Chicago, where they were down at one point 28-7 to the Bears. And Chicago, everyone knows a very put together, well kept franchise right now. Let them back into the game and allowed them to win by 3 points. This Denver team is bad. Their defense gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins in week 3. They are coming into Arrowhead. I don't know, Caleb. This is let me read some stats real quick, I guess, before I hand it off to you. Denver's defense is giving up the highest yards per play rate in the NFL. They've allowed the most passing touchdowns in the NFL, and they have the lowest pressure rate as a team in the NFL. So those are just 3 kind of categories of stats to tell you that they are bad at everything. And this is not the Denver defense of old. And so we should be in for a fun game Thursday night, don't you think?
Yeah, like the past 5 years of Denver being bad, they've been bad, but it's been tricky games because their defense has always matched up well. The Vic Fangio and anything they had from those, that's all gone. That's
Ejiro Evero was the defensive coordinator last year, and he was a Fangio disciple too. You're right, but he is gone. It's Vance Joseph. Yikes.
Yeah, and their talent is gone. Like their talent pool that they had through some of those years where they were those good where they had those good defenses is drastically dwindled. They haven't restocked it because they don't have any draft picks because they traded for Russell Wilson, who they're kind of padding his stats to justify some stuff right now. But I mean, when it comes down to it, I think the Chiefs will be more than good. The Broncos give up a lot of running yards, so I think this could be a big, Mahomes ankle, Kelce ankle. Maybe come out here and just let Pacheco and McKinnon go to work on these guys. Maybe let CEH try to play football or maybe elevate another third running back just in case. Who knows? But I don't know. This offense should completely roll these guys.
Yeah, no, it's a good point about the run defense. I mean, Miami, if you watch that game, I mean, they're just running plays, basic run plays, and they're just not getting touched, 30 yards into the, into the open field. I mean, ridiculous. Denver allowing some of that stuff to happen. I know Miami's offense has put a lot of defenses in a bind right now, but my God. Should be a good game for the Chiefs offense to get back on track. Not get back on track. They had a pretty good game in Minnesota, but just continue to get back into a rhythm. Continue that momentum from Minnesota. On the other side of the ball, you kind of mentioned Russell Wilson's stats kind of maybe being a little padded because he does have some pretty good stats this year. Has he been that bad this year? It's hard to say. The offense hasn't necessarily been terrible in terms of they've scored 33 points in a game, 31 points in Chicago. They had 21 points against the Jets last week, but at the same time, Denver's turned the ball over at inopportune times, and Russell Wilson's a big part of that. But he does have the third most passing touchdowns in the NFL, the 11th highest net yards per pass attempt. What are you seeing, or what do you feel like from Russell Wilson? Is because he did have some decent games against the Chiefs last year, right? I think last year towards the end of the season, he didn't do too bad. What is is it the pass rush? Is it the coverage? Like what's really the key, right? You're seeing kind of, I guess, as we get into Thursday for the defense.
I'm hoping the defensive line can have a turnaround kind of performance. I don't think, like we mentioned a second ago, like the Broncos O-line, they're not that great. Right. Chris Jones has kind of beat up on them a lot in the past. So, I mean, it's going to be a combination of both there. Yeah, you'd like to see them get back. You'd like to see them pressure him. It'd be a fun game to like have some turnovers, maybe like a home pick six in front of the home crowd would be fun, something like that. So, obviously, Sean Payton's in there, so they're going to get a little bit better on offense. But how much better is it? They scored a bunch of points against the Bears. Okay, the Bears aren't that great. I know they just played a pretty close game against a good Jets defense, but the Jets, counteract that by having a really bad offense for the most part. So it'll be interesting. This is a game the Chiefs should win. I know Sean Payton's going to have those guys fired up and ready to go because it's kind of his first crack he's ever had at Mahomes, in a meaningful situation, as meaningful as it can be at this point in the year for them. But, I still think the Chiefs should go out there and take care of business.
No, I agree. I do think Sean Payton is going to find a way to get them fired up. I think he has a separate playbook that he's been kind of saving for this game, because he is the Broncos head coach for the long haul right now, and he knows how important it is, to gain respect and everything to beat the Chiefs. So I think the Chiefs should be in for a dogfight, a battle. But yeah, I think Denver, you don't put these bad performances up and not just be a terrible team. I do think they're really bad right now. I think we're going to see them, snowball into being one of the worst teams, worst records in the NFL this year. And so I think the Chiefs kind of escort them to that on Thursday night. Excited for that game. Excited to join you guys back next week on the AP Out of Structure podcast. Appreciate you listening this time. Caleb joined me. Appreciate you joining me, Caleb, filling in for Stags. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, it means we have not probably done the AP Film Room yet. So make sure you check out Tuesday night on the Arrowhead Pride pages. We'll do the X's and O's breakdown, looking at the film from the Chiefs-Vikings game. Caleb will be with me doing that, so it'll be a fun time. But for that, I will get out of here on this. Shout out to you guys for listening. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you check out the website, arrowheadpride.com. Make sure you follow everybody on that site on all the social medias. We will catch you next time. Thanks for listening.